puck is dropped, and it's showtime from downtown Winnipeg. Rodgers pass, a shot, they score! Shifley Cutter scores! What a stop by Hellebuck! Nikolai Ehlers off the faceoff!
Ground Control, the official podcast of the Winnipeg Jets, hosted by Jets TV.
Hello again, and welcome back to Ground Control, the official podcast of the Winnipeg Jets. Joined here by Jets TV's Mitchell Clinton and 680 CJOB's Paul Edmonds. We got a great show for you today. Mason Appleton is our guest, the recently reacquired forward. Or did we acquire him in the first place? It was a draft pick. Would you call it an acquisition or a reacquisition?
Yeah, that's the entry-level acquisition. So, yeah, you reacquire him. You reacquire his contractual services. So, yeah, that's appropriate.
Okay, well, we'll just keep rolling along here. Mitch, as always, has the week in review. A solid week for the Winnipeg Jets, but we'll get into that in a little bit. Trade deadline acquisitions. There's that word again. Sanford and Appleton. Paul Edmonds will touch on that. And then I'll give both men the floor to talk about Andrew Copp and his time in Winnipeg. And then, of course, we'll hear from Mason himself, look at the week ahead, and then talk about just winning tight games down the stretch here and how it's paying off for the Winnipeg Jets in the standings. Mitch, like I said, we'll start with you. The Winnipeg Jets, a pretty solid homestand. They win against the Vegas Golden Knights for nothing to kickstart things. A 5-2 loss to the Ottawa Senators, which is a real kick in the boots, and then a couple back-to-back overtime wins against Columbus and Arizona. Just your thoughts on the week that was for the Winnipeg Jets.
Yeah, a number of storylines would be probably the main thing that kind of stood out to me over the course of the whole thing, because I remember after the win over the Vegas Golden Knights, Paul Edmonds was on our Jets TV Live pregame show ahead of the Ottawa game, and we were talking about, you know, the opportunity to possibly go 4 for 4 on this homestand. And, you know, you want to take it one game at a time, and that was definitely the message that Paul was getting across when we chatted about it. And the game against the Ottawa Senators shows exactly why that's the case. You know, like the Jets, you know, got frustrated, I think, a little bit by what the Senators were doing. It was hard for Winnipeg to generate a bunch of speed through the neutral zone and kind of go back and forth throughout the night. Not necessarily trading chances with the Senators, because I think they want to avoid that. But at the same time, they just weren't able to get to the game that I think that they were happy with throughout that entire thing. So then, of course, the game against the Columbus Blue Jackets, not only is it now the return of Patrick Laine and Jack Roslovic and Pascal Vincent to the building, but now it's you have to rebound from a loss to the Ottawa Senators and get back in the win column so that you don't put consecutive losses together for the first time since mid-February. Like there just isn't enough room or runway left in the season to have that happen at this point, especially while you're trying to chase down a spot in the Western Conference side of the Stanley Cup playoffs. So credit to the Jets. They were able to do that. They even had to rebound from, what is the word I'm going to call it? A frustrating, an odd finish to the 60 minutes of regulation time with Josh Morrissey taking the hit from behind there and then throwing the slash that gets called, and then the initial hit does not. And, you know, obviously a frustrating way for things to go. And then Columbus ties the game with, 14 seconds left in regulation, just 5 seconds after the Morrissey penalty. But they were able to regroup a little bit. And, Nikolai Ehlers gets the big overtime winner. Now, all of a sudden, you're back in the win column, and you've got the Saturday off away from the rink. And then, you come into Sunday against the Arizona Coyotes, and it's a game that you also want to have. And you go up against the old nemesis in Carl Vejmelka, who just seems to have the Winnipeg Jets number this season. Comes up with 38 saves against the Jets once again on Sunday. That goes with a pair of 46 save efforts that he already has. And I don't know about you guys, but in that first period, when Blake Wheeler had about 3 or 4 really good chances and Vejmelka stopped all of them, I think Tyler and I looked at each other and went, oh no, it's happening again. But Mark Scheifele obviously able to score in regulation time and then also in overtime to help the Winnipeg Jets to a 2-1 win. I think for the Jets, on top of getting 3 wins in the 4-game homestand, getting some success in overtime is also something that the team that for whatever reason wasn't able to get earlier in the season, now they've strung together 3 consecutive overtime victories this month, or even in the last 2 weeks. So that's certainly something to build on as the games, like you mentioned, Tyler, points are so important over the next little bit here that if you can have confidence going into that extra, 5 minutes of 3-on-3, that you're going to be one of the teams that, can come out and really put some pressure on and try to get that second point. That only bodes well as they head out on the road this week.
Paul, Kevin Cheveldayoff acquired Mason Appleton, like we talked about off the top, and Zach Sanford as well at the trade deadline. Andrew Copp goes out. He also acquired Morgan Barron as well in that Copp deal. But before we talk about Andrew, just what have your thoughts been on Zach Sanford and Mason Appleton so far?
Well, I think I'm going to expand it and just say that I thought Kevin Cheveldayoff and the hockey operations department did an excellent job on the deadline. I mean, they're always open to criticism from people. People want to see this, that, the other thing, how to build a team. I mean, these guys are in the front lines and they have to execute a plan. And while Brian Little was a great soldier for this organization, he was never playing here again. And Nathan Smith was never going to play for the Winnipeg Jets. So you get some cap relief by moving those two pieces off to Arizona. You also get further cap relief by divesting yourself of Nathan Beaulieu to Pittsburgh for a conditional 7th-round draft pick. So now this gives you some cap flexibility, not only for the remainder of this season, but also for seasons going ahead for the next couple, because Brian Little still had 2 years left on his deal after this season. In saying that, now you're building, at the same time all of that's orbiting around, you're rebuilding your third line on the fly. And this comes at a time when, this is going on, you've got Stastny playing center on the third line because Adam Lowry's out with COVID. And now you're losing Andrew Copp because you want to make sure that you get value for that asset on an expiring contract. So you get that back as well, and now you also get Zach Sanford. And before all of that came down, when the team's returning from a road trip, you're getting Mason Appleton, a homegrown talent here, if you will, back in the fold, and a guy that never wanted to leave and didn't really enjoy being in Seattle and wanted to come back. And you find out that Kevin Cheveldayoff had made not one, but two, but three overtures to Seattle to reacquire Mason Appleton. So what you've got now here is an assembly of a third line that you built at the deadline that, as we saw on Sunday evening in the win over Arizona, was a group that can really stifle you inside of your own zone. They are big, and I think that was the emphasis on how they wanted to build this line. Was Zach Sanford, 6'4", 6'5", a Stanley Cup champion, 27 years old. He's not a young guy. He's had some experience. I mean, almost 300 games in the National Hockey League. Adam Lowry, I mean, it speaks for himself, the body of work that he's had over a lengthy contract and extended contracts with the Winnipeg Jets. And now Mason Appleton coming back as well, a guy that you know what you're going to get from Mason Appleton. Straight line guy, has a little bit of an offensive flair, can kill penalties, gets on the body. That whole line can attack and really put pressure on you inside of your own zone. And we saw that certainly in spades on Sunday. So this was, I thought, a very active deadline for the administration, the executive of the Winnipeg Jets, but one that was very, very well done because, as I said, you move some pieces off for cap flexibility, you rebuild this third line on the fly, and you get a couple of guys in here that really are bigger bodies, and they're going to be hard to play against. And it does now give interim head coach Dave Lowry some options. Okay, do you want to line match me on the road against Scheifele or against Dubois' line? Well, I've got the Lowry line that can come out here as well and play in any circumstance. We can go against your best or we can go against your checking line. I'm okay with however scenario you want to throw it over the boards. And then now you have the advantage of that line going out when you do have last change. So there's all kinds of things and options available to the coaching staff because of the addition of that third line that was built on the fly that will, after they continue to churn. And again, I hearken back to the Sunday game against Arizona, especially and particularly in the third period. You get that kind of sustained pressure down low. At some point, the goals are going to start going for you. And when you have those secondary resources start to score and add on some offense onto everything else they do, that only bodes well when you're chasing a playoff spot. And if you get into one, it only bodes well in a 4-game or a opportunity to win 4 games in a 7-game playoff series.
Could not have said it better myself. And you're right. There are just so many layers to what was done on that deadline day that help you now, help you in a few months, help you in a year. So it'll be really interesting to see how this ripple affects, and also your summation of the Mason Appleton, Adam Lowry, Zach Sanford line. Later in the podcast, you'll hear from Mason. He basically describes the line the exact same way. So kudos to you.
And I didn't hear the interview.
You didn't.
So I wasn't cheating.
No, you weren't. Mitch, I'll give you the floor first. But Andrew Copp, he is traded to the New York Rangers in exchange for essentially Morgan Barron and a couple of draft picks as well. Just your thoughts on what Andrew did here in his time in Winnipeg. Lots, obviously, can be said about his contribution to the organization.
Yeah, I mean, wherever you needed Andrew Copp in the lineup, you could put him there and you knew what you were going to get. And I think for, current, interim head coach Dave Lowry, for Paul Maurice prior to that, that's something that as a head coach to have that type of asset is, there's almost a security blanket type of feel to it, because, if you had an injury in your top six, Andrew Copp could go up there and do that. Whether it was center or whether it was wing, he can do both. And the thing that always stands out to me about Andrew Copp is two things: confidence, because he always had the confidence in himself that he was going to be able to, develop the offensive part of his game as well. Obviously, he came in as a guy that can play really well defensively, really responsibly in his own end. And then offensively was just something that was going to develop. And through really hard work, it's the only way that you can really describe it. I'll always remember the video shoot we did with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, going there and just seeing Andrew Copp throw some passes around and all that, just, chucking to now former Blue Bomber Andrew Harris, and just the fun that all those guys really had doing that. You could just see a little bit of, even as Andrew Copp kind of stepped out onto that field with a football in his hand, you could just tell he felt incredibly comfortable and then was happy to have the opportunity to just throw a football around and have some fun. It was something that's clearly, a big part of his life, just as much as the game of hockey is. And I know Paul Edmonds' color guy, Jamie Thomas, loved to talk absolutely anything NFL with Andrew Copp, because he would have an educated opinion as well. So just he was a real nice guy off the ice, and a guy that put in an incredible amount of work on the ice, and certainly, earned everything that he got in a Winnipeg Jets uniform.
Tough year for the Andrews in the sportsing world of Winnipeg, for sure.
Harris gone.
Yeah.
Copp gone.
Is there any other Andrews?
Well, I know Andrew Collier from the Winnipeg Gold Eyes. Let's hope that he's not gone.
Well,
yeah, no kidding.
Let's hope you make it to the end of the fiscal, sir. Paul, just your thoughts on what Andrew Copp brought to the organization.
I remember Andrew coming in, and I always feel tied to Andrew, because in my first year of being able to do this job as the voice of the Winnipeg Jets on radio in 14-15, that was essentially his first year as well. He came in game 82 after his Michigan season had ended, and the Winnipeg Jets wanted to get him in the fold. They wanted to sign him, and they did. And by playing in one game where he got an assist against Calgary at home in 2015, they burned a year of his entry-level deal. And I remember talking to the assistant general manager of the Winnipeg Jets, Larry Simmons, and saying, "Why did you do that?" And he said, "Well, we wanted to see what we have here. We wanted to get him in the fold. So we burn a year, and we've got 2 years left." And as it turned out, he signed multiple contracts after that. So, from that standpoint, they got him in, and he became a very valuable player. There's a few things that I remember about Andrew leading up to the player that he became. He was scratched one game in Game 5 of the Vegas Golden Knights Western Conference Final. For that game, that never stuck very well with him, and he was motivated after that to never be a healthy scratch again, and he never was. He also, I think, had a demotion early in his career to the Moose, and that didn't stick well with him, and he was never demoted again, never played in the American Hockey League. I remember there's a few times when he was fighting to stay in the lineup, and he was a fourth-line center, saying that he felt like there was an obligation as kind of the leader of that fourth line to be the guy that pushed his wingers, his line mates, to make sure that at that time Paul Maurice didn't have an excuse not to play them. He said as a fourth line, you need to make sure that you don't get scored on. Don't take a penalty. Don't play in your own zone. Play in the offensive zone. Be defensively responsible and force the coach to play you. And so all of those things Andrew figured out a long time ago, and I think that comes back to, being a smart guy, a cerebral participant in football as a pivot or a quarterback. That lends some credence to him being able to articulate and break down the game as well. He was very good that way. And I think that the the satisfaction that he got and others watching what he did and the hard work that he put in was adding layers to his offensive game and how hard he worked in the offseason to make sure that he was getting better and more adept at putting more points up. Because let's face it, points mean pennies in the National Hockey League. More points you get, the more dollars you're going to make. And he understood that. So the last 3 or so off seasons, he worked at being better around the net, being better with his hands, being better at retrieving pucks off the wall to get it off the wall quickly into maybe the slot areas. So there was all kinds of layers to his game that he added on. He came in with a real good, adept defensive presence in the National Hockey League. He loved playing here, loved being a Winnipeg Jet. Unfortunately, he saw the writing on the wall, just the economics weren't going to fit for him to sign long-term. He mentioned that certainly in his last media availability as a Winnipeg Jet before the trade to the New York Rangers, that he wanted to buy a house here, wanted to settle in long-term, and just the way things were unfolding, he didn't see it happening. And Winnipeg had to divest themselves and make sure that they got something back on that asset. I wish him all the best, but he was a great Winnipeg Jet. He certainly accommodated you every time that there was an interview request, whether it was for 3, 5, 7 minutes. He could break the game down. We always joked, Andrew and I, about he always used to say to me, hey, I'm one of the best interviews on the team, right? And I used to say, well, yeah. And I mean, and then the one thing, too, is as we know, all of us that do this podcast, you never want to burn those guys out either, right? You want to make sure that they're fresh and they have something to say, and you don't want to go to them too often. But, yes, he was one of the best interviews on the team. Andrew, I can say that if you ever listen to this. So he will be missed. But that's the business that we're all in or that we follow. Things happen, players change, teams change. You never have the same for the next year to 2 years. Even championships change. But Andrew was a great Winnipeg Jet. Wish him all the best. And, another homegrown kind of cultured talent here that's moved on.
Yes, if you ever wanted a layup in terms of your morning skate routine or something, you went to Andrew. He probably just did the interview for you. So again, I can't echo what you guys said enough. An awesome guy to have around the team and be a part of his development path, and we wish him all the best with the New York Rangers, except for when we play them in April, but that's neither here nor there. Mason Appleton up next on Ground Control. We chat about him getting his number back. That was something that he didn't get asked about, and I was really curious to know what that process was like, as Austin Poganski was wearing that number when he was recalled for that stretch of time. We talk about his time in Seattle and what he thought of the fan base, and obviously has nothing but great things to say there. So a great little interview, so enjoy.
Shop where the players shop. Jets Gear and TrueNorthShop.com are your authentic team stores. Make sure to stock up on all your favorite Winnipeg Jets and Manitoba Moose merchandise today. Visit one of the 5 Jets Gear locations or shop online at TrueNorthShop.com.
Hi, this is Mason Appleton, and you're listening to Ground Control, the official podcast of the Winnipeg Jets.
Welcoming Mason Appleton back to the Ground Control podcast. You were a guest, I believe, before you went to Seattle. But first things first, you're wearing number 22, and when you were acquired, that was the number that you wore when you were previously here last season. But Austin Poganski had done some recall work here with the Winnipeg Jets and was wearing number 22. So just maybe explain to me the process of how you got your number back.
Yeah, actually, I knew someone was wearing it, and Jay gave me the call, and he said, I think I can get it back for you if you really want it. And I was like, yeah, that's my number. If, I got to buy him a nice dinner or something like that, I'm all for it. But it was easy for him to say, yeah, I could have it. So it's nice to be back in 22.
Well, that was a lot easier process than probably some other guys have had to go through, I would imagine. Do you have you planned?
Oh, yeah. I'm sure it hurt some guys' wallets a little bit.
Just what's it been like to be back in Winnipeg and seeing some old faces and obviously some new ones?
Yeah, it's been great. Obviously, feels like I'm back at home. Going to the hotel the first night was a little different because obviously I'm used to, getting back to my own bed when I come to this city. But, I'll go to the hotel now and feel right at home and feel like I haven't skipped a beat here.
Obviously, you come in the day before the evening before the trade deadline, but Andrew Copp leaves the next day, and I know you two were very close and played on the same line for a lot of your time here in Winnipeg. Just, I guess, is it bittersweet to come back knowing that a close friend and teammate is no longer here?
Yeah, that is tough, and we keep in touch. We talk, 4 or 5 times a week. So we knew that there were, rumors out there of everything, and obviously you can't control that. So when he got traded right there at the last minute, it sucks to see, but you wish him the best of luck, and it is what it is. But that doesn't change my relationship with Andrew. He's a hell of a player, and he's going to be really good for that team. So happy for him, but yeah, it sucks to see him leave.
You mentioned that Andrew was the one that sort of broke the trade to you. Were you able to take over his place of residence now that he's gone, or are you still at the hotel?
I was thinking about doing that, but I actually ended up finding a different place. So moving in there I'm in an Airbnb right now for the end of the week, and then moving into a place at the start of next month in Bridgewater.
Okay, nice. So just for those that don't know, obviously being traded is one thing, but then there's the whole other side of things, your life, all the things that we do away from the hockey arena. Just what was that turnaround like just to get sort of situated here in Winnipeg and into the lineup the next night?
Yeah. For me, it was very easy. I think my fiance deserves a lot of credit because she's the one that, packed up the whole house and drove out here with the dogs. My dad actually flew out to help her as well. So they got all that done and were able to make it out here a couple days ago. So, very fortunate for her. But for me, it was, I got the call that night, and then I was on the plane the next morning, and one day of travel, and I was in Winnipeg, so it wasn't too hard for me. It was very fast, 24, 48 hours, because we had a game the following day. So it's like you're in Seattle getting ready for a game there, and all of a sudden you're traded and you got your Jet jersey back on 48 hours later. So it was crazy.
You mentioned when you got here earlier last week, just that you knew what your role was here. Just how tough is it for a player when you're playing on a team where that role is sort of not as defined as what you were used to here?
Yeah, I think, clarity and knowing what you are as a player and knowing what they think of you as a player is very important, and how those come together is obviously, it determines where you're at in the lineup and, some of the success you have. So for me, or for Seattle in general, it was, you have a lot of guys that have never played together, never even know each other. So you group that together, and there's some learning curves. There's a lot of different line combinations trying to figure out, who works with who works here, who works there. So that was a long feeling out process in Seattle. And, when I finally got traded, when I first felt like I was kind of, I was on the wing with Gord, and, that's how it was for the 20 games prior. So we finally found a little bit of stability there. But obviously, on the Winnipeg side, I know my role here and, what I bring to this team. And coming down the stretch, it's about winning hockey games. So that's what I'm going to do my best to do. And, it's probably with, Lowry's the guy I played with all last year. So me and him kind of got that chemistry, work hard together, and we'll score some goals here.
Yeah, and obviously Zach Sanford acquired on deadline day as well, playing on that line. Just what have you seen from him in his time in Winnipeg?
Yeah, it's been good. Playing with him and Loud, two big bodies, and I think I will be able to hold on to the puck and create a lot of offense down low, and a lot of simple, easy offense that scores, gritty goals, and because that's kind of what we are as a line and all as individual players. So obviously last night, Loud gets the goal called back, and I get tackled at a doorstep, tapping in an empty netter. So I think there's some good signs with that, but there's a couple more steps to take for sure, just to feel that chemistry between all three of us.
Sticking with the Seattle theme, just what was that experience like to be drafted in the expansion draft and then sort of be part of that new movement, if you will, called the Kraken in Seattle, and just sort of be that rallying point for a community? Yeah,
it was, it's something like I haven't experienced before, obviously. My name got selected, and I didn't really feel much. Like, I was, excited for the opportunity, but at the same time, I knew what I had in Winnipeg, and it sucked leaving all that behind. So it was kind of a neutral feeling for me when it first happened. But, to play in Seattle, it's a great sports city. Got to experience some good football games out there, some baseball games, and then, the fans there were incredible. Bit of a challenge this year with, the wins and losses, but the fans were awesome, and they, sold out building every single night, and they brought it. So I can't say any bad things about my experience there, but all in all, I learned that this is where I want to be, so I'm thrilled to be back.
When you came back to Winnipeg for the first time about a month or so ago, you looked like you had some genuine emotion on the ice when the tribute on the score clock played. Just what was that moment like for you?
Yeah. Some people love playing their old team. Some people hate it. For me, it was like one of those things. I just wanted to get the day over it. It's tough to play a bunch of your old buddies. It's weird, but seeing the little tribute, it touches you and it makes it real. So yeah, that was awesome, and I felt like I was a big part of this team in this city, and to go the way I did, it's just unfortunate because management can only protect so many guys, and it is what it is. But it was a cool experience playing here, but something I hope I don't have to do on the away team for a while.
Yeah. Chevy mentioned in his media availability on deadline day that he had tried to acquire you several times before the deadline. Just what is it like to hear that, knowing that you have a GM here in Winnipeg that wanted you to be a part of this group, and not just after the deadline, but before as well?
Yeah, I know. It means a lot. Chevy obviously, didn't want to lose me, but that's just the nature of the beast with the protected list. So, when I left Seattle, I knew that, they obviously were a fan of me and all that, but you hear things and you hear stuff from your agent, and you can only listen to stuff so much, and you got to kind of just go about your business. So, I heard a little rumors, but, nothing's ever set in stone until it's final. So, just kind of put that in one ear and out the other. And then when it finally happened, that was probably when I was most surprised, because I was sitting there thinking, I wasn't going to get traded, and because Seattle already had traded a good amount of guys away. So I thought I was staying there, but, you get a FaceTime from Andrew, and next thing you know, you're traded.
One more question before I let you get back to the day off. And I don't know if you're going to like it or not, but I know you're a big Packers guy. Davante Adams, he's no longer there. What is going on with Green Bay? What's your take on the whole situation?
It's tough. Obviously, the best receiver in the game. Hurts to see him leave, but kind of the Green Bay way in a sense. They never overpay for guys or as it seems in those positions, and we got a ton of draft picks and a lot of cap space freed up. So hopefully, they can take those draft picks and draft well, and maybe find a good receiver in the draft, because you can't replace the Davante Adams, but if you got $20 million in cap space and a first and an early second, hopefully you can do some damage with that and round out your roster. But it sucks to see him go, because that connection between 12 and 17 was probably the best in football, and it'll be tough seeing them in black and silver now instead of the green and gold.
And last one, are you okay with Aaron Rodgers as your quarterback, or do you think they should have moved on, or how do you look at that situation?
No, I live and die for Aaron, so okay. As long as he wants to be the quarterback of Green Bay, he's got my vote. So, obviously, for him, he's got to take care of his business, and, you don't see everything that goes on behind the scenes, but excited to have him back for at least a couple more years.
Mason, thanks so much for the time, buddy. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Good chatting.
Winnipeg Jets fans, did you know that online 50-50 tickets presented by PlayNow.com are available for all Winnipeg Jets games? That's right. Whether the Jets play on the road or at home, you can participate in the game day 50-50 draw. The winner will take home half of the jackpot, with all proceeds in support of the True North Youth Foundation. Remember to buy your tickets on all Jets game days at winnipegjets.com/50-50.
Thanks so much to Mason for taking the time on the off day. I know he's probably got a million balls in the air, as he said, just with getting situated back in the city. He's moving at the end of the month. So
did he tell you he was living at, he referred to it as Hotel Shifley?
Well, no, he just told me he's at an Airbnb currently.
Oh, is that right?
Well,
It's Hotel Shifley.
Oh, okay. Well, you've been had, mister. The other thing that I just thought about with Andrew Copp is, and you mentioned Shifley, is those two had a little passing drill in the morning skates.
Right.
And the last two morning skates have been busy for myself. But have you guys noticed who's Shife's new dance partner?
No.
Adam Brooks.
Oh, there you go.
Brooksy.
I don't know if they do all the same things, but for sure, that's who he's been passing. Scheifele's been passing the puck to.
Well, that's nice. Good for
Yes.
Brooksy. And I'm happy Scheif has a new dance partner.
Things
Right.
move on.
Yeah, we have to.
Yeah.
Speaking of moving on, let's keep going with the podcast. Mitch, the Jets, they head out on the road for a back-to-backer. Buffalo, Toronto, and then a Saturday night tilt against the Los Angeles Kings, who have been very good this season. Your thoughts on what we could see from the club?
Well, obviously a game, Buffalo not a playoff team currently, so that would be one that you would definitely want to try to win. Buffalo has given the Winnipeg Jets some trouble over the last couple of seasons for sure. Those games always end up being tight, and Buffalo over the last little while has certainly been playing better. They won the outdoor game. I mean, it was something that for them I think was a big deal. Even though I think they were listed as the home team, even though the game was in Canada, which I thought was kind of odd, but still good for the Buffalo Sabres to at least see some improvement. I think, bringing in Alex Tuck, a guy that is really proud to play for Buffalo, has been, I think, important for them. So I'm curious to kind of see them. And the other thing with Buffalo too is Rasmus Dahlin has just taken another step in his development as well. I remember the goal that he scored against the Winnipeg Jets at Canada Life Center earlier this season, where he just kind of stepped in from the blue line, cut to the middle, and just absolutely wired a wrister off the bar and in. There was like absolutely nothing Connor Hellebuck could do about that one. It's just an absolutely perfectly placed shot. So all the reports that you read about Rasmus Dahlin is that he's just taken another step in his development. So clearly someone that Buffalo is happy to see develop. And then you've got the rematch with the Toronto Maple Leafs. It's crazy to think how long ago that game was, Blake Wheeler's 1,000th game and all the emotion that went into that game. And the Winnipeg Jets earning a big win that night. And of course the helmet video that came afterwards, that's where the term victory has come from, as you've seen on Jets social media after wins now. That was just a wild night in downtown Winnipeg. And I remember after that game, a number of people saying, oh, the rematch is coming in late March. I feel like so much has happened over the course of the season that now I don't know if it's going to have the same zest, at least off the start, but maybe after things get going, maybe it'll pick up a little bit. But usually games between Winnipeg and Toronto are always entertaining in one form or another. Either the final score is something ridiculous like 7-5, or there's some pushing and shoving and some tempers flaring, like we saw back when Toronto came to Winnipeg. So that back-to-back, I think, is going to be a little bit easier for the Winnipeg Jets to handle in terms of energy, just because of the fact that they've got the off day here on the Monday. They'll practice on Tuesday, finally get a nice little 2-day block in between games. So I think that'll help them going into this back-to-back. And yeah, like you mentioned, you come back and it's Wasack night at Canada Life Center. So make sure you get your tickets for that one. That's winnipegjets.com/tickets against the Los Angeles Kings, who, yeah, like similar to Buffalo, are just kind of seeing guys take the next step in their careers. And I think for guys, you look on the back end. I remember at the start of the season, Drew Doughty talking about, this is a guy that's won some Stanley Cups. Like, you'll go through a bit of a rebuild, but I think he was saying at the start of the season, like, I want to see this team take another step here. So obviously a guy like Doughty or Kopitar would be feeling that. And I remember the two matchups the Jets have had with the Kings. They've been tight games. So that's just kind of the byproduct of where we are at the end of the season too. I would expect nothing different from the Los Angeles Kings when they come into Winnipeg for Wasack night on Saturday. So, but just as we've said throughout the podcast, important game after important game after important game, and all you can really do is focus on the one in front of you. And for the Winnipeg Jets, that's Buffalo on Wednesday. Then you handle Toronto as it comes, and obviously you'll get into Los Angeles. But another important week for Winnipeg.
Yes, and you mentioned it there, winnipegjets.com/tickets. They got a cool little promotion going on right now, the Stretch Run Pack. There's a 4-game flex pack, a 5-game pack as well. And there's some benefits along with that too. Some great savings on ticket prices, Stanley Cup playoff priority purchases for rounds 1 and 2. So if the Jets do in fact make the playoffs, you'll have priority there. 10% off of Jets gear, which is obviously very nice, and a voucher to a Moose game in the future. That is to be determined. So winnipegjets.com/tickets/stretch run packs. You'll find it on our website. Hope to see you here. Paul, I'm going to close out the show with you. Lately, the Winnipeg Jets have been pulling out some of these one-goal games in their favor. Look no further than Sunday and Friday against the Columbus Blue Jackets and Arizona Coyotes, a couple of overtime victories. And we get a front row seat to this every single day. So earlier in the season, there were a lot of games that the Jets would sort of lose the one-goal game or they'd fall in overtime. I mean, I think back to both overtime games against the Dallas Stars. You want to go back even further. The Pittsburgh Penguins game, which I thought was one of the best games the Jets played all season in Pittsburgh. So just what's the importance of finally figuring out these one-goal games and coming out on the right side of it at this point in the season versus earlier in the season? And just what's the benefits of that?
Well, first off, they've won 3 straight in overtime, going back to St. Louis and then that being on the road and then 2 at home here. So that's really important because they were, and you mentioned Dallas. I mean, they couldn't beat Dallas in overtime this year. They beat them in a shootout in the first game and then lost 3 straight overtime decisions to them. So, that record suffered, and that's why that number when it comes to overtime shootout losses is 10. It's in double digits, and it's probably one of the reasons why the Jets are just below the playoff line and not at it or above it, because you turn a couple of those tight games into overtime, into wins, and maybe we're not having this conversation about them chasing a playoff spot, but maybe holding off other teams. I think it's very important when you find a way to win in tight games, because that is going to be a representation of what you're going to see further into the playoffs. And if you can find your way into being comfortable in those uncomfortable situations in that environment, that will bode well for you. That will put you in good mental stead for when the game is tied or you're behind and you need to stay in structure in order to get that one opportunity that you require to maybe tie the game or take the lead. So I think it comes to the evolution of this team. I think simply put, we would all agree they're playing their best hockey of the year right now. They're 7-3 in their last 10. They've won a couple straight on the road. They're going to go on this road trip, and they're learning to win those tight games. And I think the epitome of that was, again, Sunday against Arizona. This is a team that Blake Wheeler, by his own admission, said we've had some problems with this year. Yeah, they finished 3-1 against them in the 4-game series, but none of them were easy, including the first one that they lost 1-0 to back in November. So I think what we're seeing is an educational process with this team understanding what that environment is going to be like, what that scenario is going to be like, and now they've gotten a comfort level in it. They're a little bit more relaxed. They're not gripping the stick that tight, and I think that's what happens when you get Lowry back in and Appleton back in and a guy like Sanford that's won a Stanley Cup, just other guys now that are a little older, a little bit more hardened to those types of situations that this team is in, understanding that they need to be poised and have a presence that's patient and waiting for your opportunity. So there's been some growth here with this team for sure. We shouldn't be surprised of where they are and the fact that they're trying to pursue a playoff spot again for another consecutive year. But I think learning how to win in that type of scenario will only be beneficial for them if they get into the playoffs and get into a 7-game series. It's understandably good for them. I think they're not talking about it, but they're actually walking the walk now. And I think the proof is in the pudding with 3 straight overtime wins and the fact that they're winning some tight games, not only at home, but on the road.
Before we wrap things up, I just wanted to say the Winnipeg Jets hosted their first next-gen game on the Sunday against Arizona. And, man, some great talented kids out there that took part. Mitch, you got to co-host the pregame show with Mitch from Dauphin as well. Funny how things work out like that. Just what was your experience with the day?
It was awesome. I mean, he came in and reminded me a lot of myself, actually, when I was that age. And I remember thinking to myself, like, man, I would have loved to have had an opportunity like this when I was young. And I think, it worked out really well for him because, these kids got to come in, they got to tour the press box a few days early. I know Mitchell met Dennis Bayak a little bit. Not sure if he ran into you guys, Paul and Jamie, but I know that, he really appreciated the opportunity to kind of meet some people and see everything that happens. I was just happy that, the team was able to pick up a win as well. That makes the post-game show more fun. I thought he sat in, gave some great analysis on the pregame show, on the postgame show, seemed really comfortable. And that was awesome, like for him to just step right in and do stuff like that. So I know he does a lot of work with the Dauphin Kings and the Parkland Rangers back home in Dauphin. So, I mean, he keeps that up. There's no telling when he'll make his NHL debut. I mean, it seems like a really good kid, and it was awesome to have him around, and great that he got to commentate on a win as well.
Paul, you had a young fellow in the booth as well. Kyler?
Kyler. Yeah.
Close.
Not everybody's named Tyler.
Well, everybody in 1991 was. And that's a shot fired, Mom and Dad.
You don't like your name?
I love my name, but I remember doing some Googling one day, and
a lot of Tylers back in 1991.
In the top 5. Thanks a lot. Original.
Well, that's kind of funny too, and we're digressing here, but our youngest is named Nolan, and we thought we were naming him an original name. It turns out that Nolan's very popular for around the 2006, 7, and 08, 09 group. So, yeah, he's not that distinct. We had Kyler, and Kyler is 15 years old. He is from West Winnipeg, the St. James area, kind of the same area that I grew up in, and plays hockey and has a desire to call games. And we put him on the air, and we gave him an opportunity to kind of assess what he thought was going to go on in the pregame show. And then he did color with Jamie and I for the first period, and he was really, really good. He was a little nervous. It was funny to see, and I just kind of, there was excitement, and you can just tell in a kid's eyes that there's excitement there, whether they're really overt with it or not. You can just tell by their facial expression, and he was very excited. I don't think he was overwhelmed. He was pretty confident, which was great, and he provided some great analysis, and it's a great initiative, and one that we'll be carrying forward with certainly, I think, a lot of anticipation in the years to come when we get to kind of integrate new kids along the way in this great initiative that is the Next Gen Games. So congratulations to Mitch, and congratulations to Kyler and everybody else that was part of it. It was very well done.
Well, if we learned one thing on this podcast, is that the name Mitchell is timeless, given the fact how old you are, Mitchell. So,
exactly.
All right, that just about does it. Get me out of here. You've been listening to Ground Control, the official podcast of the Winnipeg Jets. We'll talk to you next week.
This has been Ground Control, the official podcast of the Winnipeg Jets, hosted by Jets TV. For Jets news, videos, and more, head to winnipegjets.com.
Proceed with Able.